Hey everyone, it's good to see you back. It's been quite some time. Long story short, I think you can only juggle so many balls in life, and YouTube was the one I decided to drop. However, I will keep making videos, and maybe not as frequent as I did before, but I like it, so I will definitely keep doing it. Of course, don't forget, if you like this type of content, please subscribe to the channel, because I'm planning to make different videos like these as well, also one for media developers and senior developers. So in this video, we'll go over how I would conduct a React interview for a junior developer. The goal here is to see if this person has a solid understanding of React and is able to deliver code that works and is taken care of, as in that it is relatively clean and it does what it is supposed to do. Please know that I'm fond of practical questions. Too often I see interviews that have all kinds of things like data structures and algorithms in it. And of course, if that's part of the job, then it makes sense to include that in the interview process. However, for most React developers, it comes down to creating web applications, and I hate all this theoretical gibberish. So these questions will be really focused on practical, real-world use cases that you as a junior developer have to deal with on a daily basis. So I've divided the interview in 3 sections. In the first part, we're going to take a look at questions about React and web development in general. The second part are like non-code related questions. Of course, they are related to you as a web developer, but they're not really so much about the code or the technologies itself. And the third part is a code test, where I will do some live coding, and we will try to take on a coding challenge. Now, what I really want you to do is to, whenever I ask a question, to immediately pause the video and try to give an answer just as if you would in a real interview, because I think this is really the best way to learn as much as possible from this video. You might learn from mistakes, or you might get new insights how you could answer that question. And I'm sure that will stick much better if you try to actively engage with the questions I'm answering in this video. So the first question is, can you explain me how you define and use props for a certain component when using React with TypeScript? So this is quite simple. So it's conventional to type your props above the component itself, and usually you would call it the name of the component props, so for example dashboard props, and right there you will define the props and their types, and then you can destructure it in the component by assigning the type, in this case dashboard props, to it. So to give you an example, right here in the React TypeScript cheat sheet, which is a great source of information for using React with TypeScript, you would use something like this, right? So you have a type, you get your props right here, you define them, and then you can use them in your component by destructuring those props right here by assigning greet props to it. Next question, how would you communicate with a database in React? So of course, this depends on the app itself, but usually it's not very common to mutate a database directly from your React app. Most of the times you have a server, an API in between your front end, so your React app, and the database. So what you would do is you would make an API call to the server, and then the server will, depending on whether the request is valid, of course, mutate the data within the database. However, you will get bonus points if you would say something like, but it is possible, for example, through tools like Firebase. So Firebase, you can download their SDK, and you can actually directly mutate the database from your React app without really making a traditional HTTP fetch to a server, because you're using the SDK. Next question, let's say I have a component which needs to re-render if a certain value changes. How can I do that? So of course, this totally depends on the use case. Why would you want to re-render the component, based on which value, and where it is stored. But in general, there's a few ways to make a component re-render, and that is by passing props, right? So when the prop changes, the component will re-render. You might be using a use state within the component that causes a re-render. You might be using a use effect where you have added a value to the dependency array which causes the component to re-render. Or you might even use a state management tool which causes the re-render of the component. And of course you can also like forcefully manually cause the component to re-render based on a state change. But again, like I said, totally depends on the use case and where the value is stored. Next question, what is considered with so-called controlled and uncontrolled components? So some people have different definitions for what is considered a controlled and uncontrolled component. However, most of the time people mean a component is controlled if it receives props from a parent component and could therefore be controlled by changing the props. And an uncontrolled component would be one that doesn't receive props and is therefore not able to get controlled by its parent component through props. Next question, which is quite a difficult one. Would you use a type or an interface for defining props in React, and why? So this is a pretty difficult question for a junior developer, and I think there's also a good question to see whether he or she is honest, because if you don't know the answer to this, and that's within every interview, then just tell them. Or you can of course also tell them, well, I don't know it for sure, but I think this and this. In this case, it actually comes down to personal preference, right? And that's even stated in the official TypeScript documentation. As you can see right here, it says for the most part, you can choose based on personal preference. It also says if you would like a heuristic, use interface until you need to use features from type. But I think the React TypeScript cheat sheet has a very good article that explains why you might prefer type when defining props. Right here it states that consider using type for your React component props, and state for consistency and because it is more constrained. And you can read that also in the links right here. But I personally would be most interested in keeping it consistent throughout the code base. That's most important. But I would skew towards type because, like it says, it is more constrained, and I think in general that is a good thing. But honestly, if a junior would give an answer like that, I would be really surprised, and that would for me be a very good sign that this person is heavily vested into the React ecosystem, or obviously has been watching one of my videos. But I mean, for a junior, that would be an amazing answer, and would definitely score a lot of points in my eyes. All right, let's move on to the next part, which is the part in which we will answer some non-code related questions. And the first one is, why did you apply for a developer role with React as its core technology? Can't really think of a wrong answer right here, but of course it can be because of many reasons. It can be because someone really likes to work with React, or because someone has done a lot of projects with React and find that to be on his or her best skill. It can be because someone thinks React is a very good technology that will stay here for quite some time and is able to give you some level of job security. Many different answers, but it's good to have at least prepared an answer for these kind of questions, simply because it would show me that you have been thinking about, why you actually like React. Next question, how do you decide whether to go to a colleague asking a question or try to find it out yourself. So in my perspective, a junior developer should be somewhat independent, but still needs a bit of guidance. And I think this guidance mainly should come from code reviews and pair programming. However, I think it's important for every developer to be aware of that, some problems that might arise during web development are not, you cannot really Google them. It's something you have to decide upon with your team, or maybe even with your seniors, to make the best decision for the project. So that's one scenario. But another example could be when you as a developer are really stuck with a certain bug or feature you're developing, right? Every developer, and especially early on in your career, you might find yourself getting stuck at a certain problem. You can't find the answer on Google, and well, you essentially don't know what to do. I think that's a good point also to step up to a senior. The reason is that you often see two types of developers. There are the type of developers that still try to make it work. They will probably take a lot of time to get the work done, and in the end it might not even work, or the code itself is just really hacky. So I think if you're in doubt, go to one of your seniors and ask them, like, hey, I have this problem, can you guide me a little bit in terms of what is the best decision? Next question: do you prefer to work alone or in a team? I think the best answer to this question is both, right? Good developers are independent, but also know how to work with other people. And I personally prefer a healthy balance between both of them. I really like to develop when I'm alone, because that's usually when I'm most productive. But I definitely see the benefits of collaborating, for example, through pair programming, or just planning a session where you talk with other developers about some issues that you're struggling with. I think it's always good to have that balance and to have the ability to both work in a team and alone. All right, next part is the code test. It's not a very difficult test, but I would definitely advise you to try to make the test before I will do the live coding, where I will show you the solution, or I say the solution, but there's probably many implementations to this. But yeah, let's just quickly go over it. So we are going to build a React app with TypeScript in Code Sandbox. It should have a button, and when you click it on a single click, it should show an image of a cat from Unsplash. If you don't know Unsplash, it's a place where you can get stock images for free. And if you double click the button, it should show an image of a dog. Now, what's in scope? If you see a dog image and double click, you shouldn't see the cat image. The other point is that you should not use the Unsplash API, right? So we have to find a way to not use the Unsplash API, but still retrieve an image from there. What's out of scope is the styling, so we don't have to worry about CSS or making it look pretty. And we do not have to show a new image on re-renders. So that means whenever let's say you click the button once and you see the image of the cat, if you then again click it once, you should not, of course you can implement it if you can, but that's not really part of the assessment right here. So it's perfectly fine if you click it then and still see the same image. And a side note is that you are allowed to Google things, right? This is not always allowed during interviews. However, I think it's good to let people allow to Google certain things, because honestly, that's a very important part of the job as well. I Google things pretty much almost every day, and I've been doing that over the course of my whole career. It's a very important part of web development. And what I'm mainly interested in is how someone would try and Google a specific question and where he is going to try to find the answer from. So I just went to the codesandbox.io website. I signed in with my GitHub account, and when you click right here on new from template, you can pick a project. So we want to have React with TypeScript. So what I will first do is remove the styling and the things we don't need. So right here we have a styles.css file. We don't need that one. We also don't need that import. All right, so and of course we also don't need this. So first of all, I will create a button. I will add at least two elements, right? We will add at least a button and the image. So I will say button, and I will give it a name. I will say show image of a cat or dog. So here we have the button, and now we want to show an image, let's say below it, so that image always has a source URL and alt text. So the alt text, we don't know it for both, right? Right now we have to find out how we can get an image from Unsplash, and you've got to keep in mind that we were not allowed to use the Unsplash API. So in this case, it's perfectly fine, of course, to Google it. So I will look for something like get random image from Unsplash. So here, well, here you have the Unsplash image API. We're gonna of course take a look, but we should not use the API. But right here, it does not really say something about, like, because we have to of course provide credentials right here. Maybe search photos. Yeah, there's nothing right here. But well, in that case, you might decide to try to find some other sources, right? So I see this link right here: generate random images from Unsplash without using the API. And if you would read this article, you would find that they have an example right here. It's source.unsplash random, and then they have two keywords: city and night. And when I click it, we indeed get an image, random image, which shows a city at night. So what if I copy this and I'll take cat as the keyword, and there we go, it works. So we can use that in our app. So we can say cat, and right now it's pretty big, so we could, even though we do not really have to care about the styling, but right here you can see you can make it for example squared by putting the dimensions behind random. So we have 300 by 300 pixels, and that should give us a smaller squared looking picture. All right, that's good. So now whenever we click the button, we should show the image of the cat, and when we double click it, we should show an image of a dog, which means that we need to track some state, right? We need to track whether you should show the cat or the dog. So I will use a useState hook for that. I will say const, and I will say image type, set image type is useState, and by default we have nothing selected, right? So image type could be undefined, but it could also be either cat or dog. So what I want to do, I want to make a union type for that. You could also do it by enums, but I prefer to create a type for that, and we'll have either cat or dog. So this will be type image, so that use state could either contain an image of either cat or dog, or it could be undefined. You can see that when you hover over it, image type could be image or undefined. So we can say whenever the image type is undefined, so when it equals to false, then we don't want to show anything. So we have, if it's like either cat or dog, we show the image, and otherwise we will show nothing. We will show null. And the reason I'm using the ternary operator right here instead of, because you could of course also do something like this, is that I think in general it's just better practice to use ternary operators. You can also find a lot on the web about that, why that actually is, but there's cases where you get weird behavior if you're using the AND operator. So I try to avoid it altogether. Just like never use it, because it might introduce bugs, and you can never go wrong with a ternary. So that means right now if we click on a button, still nothing happens, because we, on the button click, we want to set the image type. So we could say something like const handle click. That should set image type to cat, and then we can pass that function to the onClick event of the button, and then right here, if you will click on the button, you will see the image of the cat. So that's the first step. And well, I know it exists that you also have a double click event. If you don't know that, it's perfectly fine to Google that. But I know the double click event exists as well. So you could also say, instead of handle click, handle double click. And then we want to set the image type to dog. So we could say right here, on double click, we want to handle double click. So now if we refresh the app, we click right here, it shows the image of the cat. If we double click it, it doesn't show the image of the dog yet, because the image is still set to cat. So of course we have to make that search operator conditional. So I will use string interpolation right here, and I will say that this should either be cat or dog, and I can do that by passing the image type in here. Perfect. So now if I click it, image of a cat, double click, image of a dog. Awesome. However, we're not done yet, because if you take a look right here, it says if you see a dog image and double click, you shouldn't see the cat image. So if we double click, you see the image of the dog. However, if we then double click it again, you will see the image of the cat. And the reason for that is that we also trigger, by double clicking, the onClick event. And that makes sense, because that onClick event, of course, is not able to know if a click is falling off after that. So that's why it's triggering. And then when you double click it, then also this event will trigger. So we need to find a fix, because we should not see the cat image. Now, to be honest, well, of course, I've prepared this a little bit, but I think I've never in my career, came across such a use case. And in that case, what I would do, my first reaction would be, well, let's Google it. Let's take a look what other people say about this. Maybe I'm, there's very simple solutions. Maybe there's not, but we can always try to take a look. And I'm sure, of course, a lot of people have encountered this issue. So I will Google something like how to prevent, let's see, prevent. By the way, this is not my search history. This is default Google search queries, which are, by the way, popular, I think. So how to prevent click event when double clicking React. So right here now, you've got a lot of links. I think usually you will find the best information on GitHub. If of course, if it's, if people have created an issue or something like that. But that's usually where you find very high quality answers. Other than that, you will also find good stuff in Stack Overflow. Problem there is that sometimes the best answers, you might have to look for it a little bit, because there's often many threads about the same topic, all from different periods, and you might think, well, let's take the most recent one because that will give me the most recent answer. But unfortunately, that is not always the case, because often you will find very good answers actually in the older posts, and that's because people keep updating their answer as time goes by. But what I usually do, I open a few links. So right here, I see people have even written articles about it. I see Stack Overflow. I literally open all of those. I see something right here. Dev.to, also a good website. GitHub. All right. So we have a lot of things. I just quickly scan over them. See, like, what does their implementation look like? So here we get a solution with hooks. That has quite a lot of it's quite a lot of code. What I'm usually looking for is something that looks simple, right? Not a lot of code, easy to understand for other people. That's usually what I'm looking for. Let's take a look right here, Stack Overflow. So here they use, I think this is a different use case because they use the disabled prop right here. Yeah, okay, so this guy actually is, he tries to disable the button after its first use, but that's not our use case. This seems to be the same. I think I opened it twice. There's a higher order component. It's quite a lot of code, but I'll keep looking for something that looks good. Also right here we seem to have the disabled state, not what we're looking for. Lots of code again. Shouldn't be all that difficult. Threshold. I find this a little bit hacky, to be honest. Let's take a look right here. Debounce. Okay, so they use callback, and I believe he also said something like context right here. Not too much of a fan of that, to be honest, because a lot of, let's be honest, those are things not everyone knows, like what use callback and all these things are. So I prefer to keep it simple. So these are usually good places, right? Facebook, React, official GitHub issue that has been opened. So take a look for the thumbs up, and of course the thumbs down. So this seems to work for some and not for others. So this would make sense in my eyes, where you set a timeout to prevent the click event from happening when you're actually double clicking. And I've also seen that right here in these threads. So here we see one. Use a fact block. Clear timeout. That's a lot of code again. Not a big fan of that, to be honest. Personally, if I've watched all these links, and of course you can continue searching for a good answer. I personally like this one. It's pretty clean and concise. It's quite simple, right? If clicks is 1, then do the single click thing. If the clicks are 2, then do the double click thing. And it also properly removes the timeout in the cleanup in the use effect. So this, and right here, the implementation is very simple. So I will decide to go with this one and then see if it works. So I'm just going to copy paste this stuff. And again, there's nothing. Some of you might think like, is this how I should do the interview? Well, obviously, if they tell you not to Google things, you should not do it. But I think, and some people might also be watching this video, like as the person that will take the interview to get some like ideas on how to do it. I think these are really, this is stuff you do on a daily basis, right? This is very important that you're able to find these type of things. So I think this is not weird for an interview. This is just the daily life of a web developer. And it's perfectly fine to use that. So we have the on-click event right here. So we can now remove this, of course. There we go. So of course, if you copy paste code, there's also always things that will not work, especially with TypeScript. So we seem to have to import the use effect. Got right here single click timer, which is implicitly has the any type. Okay, so we need to find a type for that. Double click thing. Okay, so this is of course the single click thing, right? So it should set the image type to cat, and this should be set to dog. I can remove these ones. Okay, so the only thing that goes wrong right now is this one. So this is a timeout. Namespace timeout. Set timeout. So to be honest, I don't know. Let's take a look. Set timeout TypeScript type. Yeah, so we get return type of set timeout. Exactly. Okay, that seems to make a lot of sense. Cool. Perfect. All right, well, let's try it out. Show image of a cat. There we go. Double click, maybe a bit faster. Dog. Double click. We should not see the cat. That's good. Double click again, one click, cat, perfect. Okay, so to give you an idea of how this code is working, because I think that's always, when you grab stuff from the internet, you should at least know what it does. Is right here, it essentially sets a timeout. We can actually make this a little cleaner because I don't really like this. Do it like that. But what it does, it sets a timeout of 250 milliseconds, which essentially means that if you double click within 250 milliseconds, then it will actually, this part of the code, so the else if, will actually run. Otherwise, the single click event will be triggered. The downside, of course, of that is that since it will always wait 250 milliseconds. So if we now double click for the dog, you will see it will appear very quickly, and you'll see there's a bit of, it takes a while before the cat image renders, and that's because the 250 milliseconds prevent it from like executing immediately. So that's one of the downsides right here. Of course, you could also always do research like if 250 milliseconds is really the right time for a double click, but that is way beyond this assessment. But yeah, this essentially is how I would send in the assessment. What I've lately like to do is to give some meaning to that use effect, right? Often you see components with 2 or 3 use effects, and it starts to get a little bit tricky, like what are they actually doing? So something I like to do is to give them a name, right? So I will say handle button click, like that. Of course, might not be as I wouldn't say clean, because I would consider this clean, right? It makes the code easier to understand. But yeah, you will add like another line of code. But I definitely like this implementation. Of course, there might be different implementations, might be even cleaner ones. But I think if you are having to do like a live code assessment, then yeah, this would be perfectly fine. And well, hopefully you've tried to code along, or even better yet, try to implement it yourself without watching this part first. If you were not able to make it, I would say this is quite difficult for a junior developer, right? I think there's definitely companies that will have easier assessments for juniors. And I think because the tricky part right here, you know, like right now I've been able to prepare this a little bit. And of course, if you're coding right now, you don't feel the pressure of someone like looking over your shoulder what you're doing. You're afraid to make mistakes. But I think the takeaway from this coding test is that you know, it's not bad to having to look things up, right? Also, I have to do it. So, and I do it on a daily basis, and I'm not feeling ashamed for it. You know, there's been many threads on Stack Overflow I've been probably opening like over 20 times, and it's still not in my mind, and I don't care, because I think it's a waste of time trying to remember all these things. And I think on the other hand, let's say something new comes out, right, in terms of features. Those are the places where you will find it. So I always like to revisit like Stack Overflow or GitHub to check if there's a better, a nicer way to implement something. So you know, it's not bad at all. So that was about it. Thank you so much for watching. Next time I will probably be making a video for Meteors React developers, and after that one for seniors, and of course many other videos will follow. I want to thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you like this type of content. Having that said, thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.